She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. In a fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love, and I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from my hiding.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. At the start of this month, March 2023, 43-year-old Angela Craig was a wife and a mother of 6 living in Aurora, Colorado. On March 6th, Angela began to feel ill, and over the next 10 days, she would be in and out of the hospital, complaining of severe headaches and dizziness, nausea, just a general horrible feeling. But even though she went to 2 different hospitals, the doctors and the medical staff at these hospitals could not figure out what was wrong with her. When Angela was admitted to the hospital on March 15th, her condition rapidly deteriorated. She had to be placed on a ventilator after having a massive seizure. The hospital staff allowed her husband, 45-year-old dentist Dr. James Craig, and their children to come in and say their goodbyes, and Angela would later be declared brain dead. And on March 18th, 2023, Angela Craig was removed from life support and she passed away. But even before her husband James refused to allow an autopsy to be performed on his wife, who had mysteriously died from something the doctors couldn't figure out, so you would think that he would want an autopsy. Even before that, he was already under the microscope of law enforcement because they had it on good authority that James Craig may have been poisoning his wife Angela's morning protein shakes. Now, we are going to dive into the details of this case, and even though it is new and ongoing, there's a surprising amount of information out there, most of which can be found in the arrest affidavit of James Craig, which I will be referring to and using throughout this video. So it gives us a good amount of information, this arrest affidavit, but when this case goes to trial, there's going to be a lot more coming out. I can feel it. I know it, a lot more. And what we're going to talk about today is so shocking already. I think that what we're going to find out during the trial is going to be even more shocking, if possible. You know, I always think that I'm some hardened true crime person because I've been doing this long enough and I've built up calluses around my proverbial heart so that nothing can surprise me or knock the emotional wind out of me. But this case has proved me wrong, and I am stunned. I'm stunned that anyone could be as cold, cruel, and heartless as Dr. James Craig. What he's accused of doing goes way beyond murder. And if I didn't have the text messages and the emails in front of me to prove it, I might not believe it. I might not believe that any human could be so despicable, especially towards a person that he had been married to for over 20 years, a person who gave him 6 beautiful children, a person he shared a literal entire life with. It's really scary. It's really scary and really unsettling. I also want to talk about Gannon Stauch quickly before we dive in. This is a case that has really stuck to me, for years. It stuck to me years ago when it first happened, and I've been following it and waiting for the day when Gannon's stepmother and murderer, Letitia Stauch, would be going on trial and finally facing justice, and that time is now. At this moment, they're doing jury selection for Letitia Stauch's trial, and opening arguments are expected to begin in early April, so I will be following the trial, and I will be giving updates on YouTube and also probably Instagram and TikTok as the trial goes along. I've not forgotten about Gannon. I never could. And if this woman, Letitia Stauch, doesn't get the book thrown at her, I'm taking to the streets. We're all taking to the streets, okay? Peaceful protests, whatever. It's going to be bad. I think that Gannon Stauch is actually another case that happened in Colorado. And there's a lot of cases that happen in Colorado. But I will be going to Colorado and I will be protesting if Letitia Stauch doesn't get life in prison or, the electric chair. Okay, before we dive in, let's have a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. This YouTube channel is a true crime YouTube channel, and here and on my other channel, Crime Weekly, we talk about horrible things happening to people all the time. And we talk about the figures who are committing these crimes, the creeps like Jared from Subway, like the dude we're going to talk about today, like Casey Anthony. There's so many horrible people out there that are always, scheming and trying to hurt others. And not only do we have to worry about those people walking around in real life, but we have to worry about them being on the internet, creeps on the internet, trying to get close to you and trying to get a look at the private information that you don't want them or anyone else to see. And if that's not bad enough, not only do you have to worry about protecting yourself from the nefarious figures lurking in the dark crevices of the world and in the internet, but you also have to worry about your own internet service provider selling your personal data without your consent. But at least I know I can be safe and anonymous on the internet with Surfshark VPN. And here's the best part, so can you. I've used Surfshark for years now. At first, I didn't think I was going to use it as often as I do because I knew that there was a process into signing in and stuff, and I'm so lazy when it comes to things like that. And I'm technologically challenged, so I was like, it's probably going to be too hard, too complicated, too much for me to do. However, it's super easy. Literally a couple clicks, you're in, and then you just don't have to think about it or worry about it for the rest of the time you're on the internet. Surfshark secures your data with industry-leading measures by using uncrackable encryption and the most secure VPN protocols. And when I say your data, I mean everything. Your sensitive information like credit cards, banking information, but also your private information like your text messages, your emails, those photos, those videos that you might have on that phone of yours. And maybe those photos and videos on your phone are just for you, or maybe you meant them for one special someone, or maybe you meant them for multiple special someones. I don't know, you do you. But I know that you probably don't want people seeing them who you didn't intend to see them. And not only that, but the stuff that makes you valuable as a consumer, these people are after, the things you're searching for on the internet. When you're using social media, what you're using social media for, the devices you're using to access the internet. Your internet service provider can see all of that, and they sell it to the highest bidder. So that companies can target you and, more accurately sell to you. You're being profiled. And honestly, I don't want anyone making money off of me unless I'm getting a big cut of it. You feel me, right? Your ISP or your internet service provider can also slow down your internet connection. They do that if they think you're using too much data. This happens to me in my household, or it used to happen to me before I used Surfshark all the time. And it was very disruptive to my day. I'm always online for work. I have kids who like to game. They're always online. It was very problematic when we were using that much data and our internet service provider was always slowing us down. Surfshark VPN encrypts your internet traffic so even your ISP cannot see what you're doing. Surfshark also provides IP and DNS leak protection so that nobody can find out where you're connecting from, and they maintain a strict no logs policy, which means they never store or save what you're doing on the internet, which a lot of ISPs do because, once again, they want to sell your data. And all of that sounds complicated. Like you said, you might think that this is too much, too hard. You aren't tech savvy enough to know where to start. That's how I felt. And I can promise you Surfshark is so easy to use. And if I can say that, it's true. You just have to install it and then run it. And Surfshark will connect you to the server that offers you the best speeds by default. And Surfshark VPN is jam-packed with features that go way beyond the basics. And these features allow you to not only protect yourself and your personal information, but there's a lot of other fun benefits, like having access to entertainment you might not otherwise have. By simply changing your IP address to a different country, you can instantly gain access to their massive content library. With Surfshark VPN, you can also unlock 15 of the largest Netflix country libraries, including the US and Japan. And Surfshark has now reached coverage in 100 countries, which is huge. And I mean, something as simple as trying to watch a March Madness game, right, on Watch ESPN. They'll often say they're blocked out in my area. It drives me crazy. And that used to be it for me. I'd be like, well, I just can't watch this game, I guess. But now I just change my location on my VPN and I can watch it all of a sudden. So it's pretty awesome that Surfshark VPN not only keeps you safe, but gives you all these other fun benefits as far as entertainment and things go. And best of all, my favorite feature is that one Surfshark VPN subscription allows you to install and run Surfshark on an unlimited number of devices. That is big for me because I do want to see my kids, my family, my loved ones protected. So literally your mom, your kids, your partner, your dad, your brother, your sister, like when they say unlimited, they mean truly unlimited. And there's apps for multiple platforms, including PlayStation and Xbox. So if you've got a gamer in the family, or if you're a gamer and you want to keep them safe on the internet, you should definitely install Surfshark VPN. You really have nothing to lose. You've got to try Surfshark VPN for yourself. It's going to protect you. It's going to give you lots of other fun benefits. And if you find it's not for you, they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, which gives you plenty of time to try Surfshark out risk-free. Literally nothing to lose. Like, I'm going to say it again. Right now, for a limited time, you can get 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months for free. All you have to do is go to surfshark.deals/stephanieharlowe. There's an E on the end of Stephanie and Harlowe, and this special offer makes your subscription just $2.21 a month, literally less than a cup of coffee for the whole month. And this way you can browse securely on all of your devices. Once again, go to surfshark.deals/stephanieharlowe for 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months for free. You can also click the link in the description box. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Angela Craig was born on April 15, 1979 in Dodge City, Kansas, and she was one of 10 children. Her parents and her siblings were active in the LDS community and the church, and family was always very important to Angela. She especially had a close bond with her sister Toni, and from the looks of it, Angela and Toni spent a lot of time together. They did a lot of traveling together, taking sisters' trips as much as possible. I mean, from Angela's Facebook, that is what it looks like to me, and I know that Toni lived in Utah and Angela lived in Colorado. So because they were separated, by some distance, they talked on the phone every single day, and they often, would see each other, visit each other, and then go on trips. From Angela's Facebook, it looks like they traveled all over, and it looks like they were very, very close, which once again, I'm putting myself in Angela and Toni's shoes here. I have a sister who is my best friend, who I'm very, very close to, and I cannot imagine what Toni and the rest of Angela's family is going through right now. According to her obituary, Angela loved animals, even though she was allergic to most of them. She loved eating off of food trucks. She loved watching mystery television shows and being outside and working on creative projects like woodworking. She also enjoyed reading, and she was a passionate student of interior design. And even though she didn't like to go out and socialize too much, and she preferred the company of her husband and children above anyone else, she was super great at talking to people, and she was great at making people laugh and elevating their moods and, frankly, their lives. On December 18th, 1999, Angela married James Craig, who would go on to become Dr. James Craig after he went to undergraduate school at BYU, Brigham Young University, where he obtained his Bachelor of Science in Zoology, after which he studied at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Dentistry, where he got his Doctorate of Dental Surgery degree in 2006. After completing 2 years of research on bone substitutes and composites for the NIH, James became a college professor at his old alma mater, teaching courses in clinical dentistry, biochemistry, and histology. He also founded the International Dental Student Program, which helped to bring licensure to foreign-born dentists who wanted to practice in the United States. Now, at the time of Angela's death, this month, March 2023, she and James had 5 girls and 1 boy. I believe the son was the oldest child. And all of these children were between the ages of 8 and 21. 6 children whose loving and compassionate mother would be stolen away from them forever, and in the most horrible way, and for absolutely no reason. When James was arrested on Sunday, March 19th, he was charged with the first-degree murder of his wife of 22 years, and that murder charge was with deliberation, meaning it was premeditated. Now, I do have to shout out several people involved in this case, because so often in these cases, what I'm doing is just, talking shit about people who saw red flags, like the one Dale Cooper's holding back there, people who saw red flags and didn't do anything or say anything. And in this situation, we have a lot of people who saw red flags and did something about it. You know that I always encourage everyone to do this. If you see something, say something. I truly believe the only reason this case was cracked so quickly was because of these people who felt there was something suspicious going on. And despite a barrage of incredibly skilled gaslighting coming at them from James Craig, they did the right thing and reported their suspicions to the hospital and to the police. Now, after the arrest of James Craig, Aurora Police Division Chief Mark Hildebrand announced, quote, When the suspicious details of this case came to light, our team of officers and homicide detectives tirelessly worked to uncover the truth behind the victim's sudden illness and death. It was quickly discovered that this was in fact a heinous, complex, and calculated murder. End quote. That it was. As a disclaimer, everybody is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, but as a Stephanie Harlowe allegedly opinion, James Craig is guilty as sin. Police and prosecutors and Stephanie Harlowe believe that Dr. James Craig poisoned Angela's protein shakes with cyanide and with arsenic so that she would be out of the way and he could be free to be with another woman, a woman he'd been having an affair with, another dentist from Texas. And not only that, the whole time he was poisoning her. And the whole time that Angela felt sick, James acted as if he was taking care of her, as if he was concerned about her. And all the while, he was buying plane tickets for his girlfriend so she could fly from Texas to Colorado. And he was spending time with her and seeing her, reportedly, while his wife Angela was fighting for her life in a hospital bed that he had put her in. It's really bad. Let me give you a quick timeline. From March 1st to March 5th, Angela Craig was visiting with her sister Toni in Utah. Angela returned home on March 5th, and she first started feeling sick on March 6th. She went to the hospital and was released that same day. Angela returned to the hospital on March 9th. This time she was not released until March 14th, and the doctors could still not figure out what was wrong with her. But the very next day, on March 15th, Angela was back in the hospital, but this time she would not be released. She would not return home. And around 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., Angela had a severe seizure. She had to be intubated, and the doctors noted that she was suffering from a lack of oxygen. She had no pupil reaction, and she had intracranial pressure. On March 15th, 2 people traveled to the hospital to see Angela. These 2 people were Ryan and Michelle Redfern. Now, Ryan was James's business partner at the dental practice, and he had been James's business partner at the dental practice since August of 2022, when he had bought the business because it had been struggling financially. Reportedly, James had declared bankruptcy in the summer of 2021, and according to Ryan Redfern, he was on the verge of having to do it again. Ryan was also a dentist, but he didn't work at the Summerbrook Dental Group that James Craig worked at. Ryan was just a partner. He was the money behind the business. But Ryan had also known James for over 20 years, so it wasn't as if this was just business. They were friends. They'd attended college together, and Ryan and Michelle Redfern considered themselves to be close friends to both James and Angela Craig, even though James had recently confided in Ryan that he and Angela were having marital problems and they might be getting a divorce. But of course, when Angela felt ill and she was in and out of the hospital, the Redferns just assumed like all of that was put to the side while James was more concerned with Angela's health. And the Redferns were also concerned about Angela, and they wanted to offer their support to James during this very difficult time. Now, Michelle Redfern actually had a PhD in nursing, and so she had started texting James regularly after Angela had to be admitted to the hospital for the second time on March 9th. Michelle knew that the doctors hadn't been able to figure out what was wrong with Angela, so she wanted James to keep her in the loop about Angela's condition and keep her updated on Angela's symptoms so that she could hopefully help and maybe see if she could, determine something that the doctors had missed, because 2 heads are better than 1 and 10 heads are better than 2. On March 9th at 3 p.m., Michelle Redfern texted James Craig asking if he needed anything. He was in the hospital with his wife Angela at that time, allegedly. And James responded, quote, "Thanks for offering, but for now, I think we've got more support than we can handle. Gotta love the church." End quote. And yes, the characters in this story are Mormons. They're affiliated with the LDS Church, but let's not use this as an opportunity to trash the LDS Church in the comment section, because I think that you can be a part of any organized group, any organized religion, and do it for the purposes of looking like a good person. But there are a lot of people who are a part of religion or religious groups, and they actually are good people. Like, for instance, Angela Craig. So we can't just throw them all into one pile and say bad, bad, bad. So let's not do that, and let's be respectful of other people's religious beliefs. But anyways, Yes, they are part of the LDS Church, and yes, there is a big community there. You can see it in these texts, especially in the texts between James and his wife Angela as she is going through her illness. There's people constantly offering to help with the kids, taking the kids so that James could go to the hospital, bringing food over, checking in, etc., etc. So James is like, nah, it's all good. We've got more support than we can handle at this moment, which is fair because usually you don't want a ton of people around when you're going through something hard. So Michelle then asked James if there was any diagnosis yet, to which he responded that there wasn't. Later that day at 6:21 p.m., Michelle texted James again, asking if he had any news, and he responded, quote, "Nothing yet. They just admitted her to the hospital for an overnight observation." End quote. The next morning, March 10th at 9:07 a.m., Michelle texted James again, asking how Angela had done overnight, and he responded, quote, "Low blood pressure all night, vomiting in the morning. Still trying to figure this out." End quote. Michelle texted James later at 6:14 p.m. asking if the doctors were making any headway and if James needed anything, and he responded, quote, "Thanks, Michelle. It's been pretty rough not having any answers. I get pretty nervous. They did so many tests. They've done 4 or 5 different blood draws. The regular blood panels all come back okay, and she's negative for autoimmune disorders, negative for diabetes. Her A1C was 5.5. The main issue they seem to be concerned about right now is blood pressure. They dumped 5 liters into her IV over 24 hours, and she looks super puffy and swollen. But her blood pressure is barely 100/60. Yesterday morning it was 56/44. So although that is the main concern that the doctors have, my main concern is just how she's feeling. Really pretty crappy. They're going to keep her one more night and hopefully she can come home tomorrow sometime." End quote. Wait until I tell you what James Craig was doing while he was writing and sending all of these sweet doting husband texts. And spoiler alert, it wasn't hoping that his wife Angela could come home soon. So Michelle and James, they go back and forth for a bit, kind of in this same vein. Michelle asking, could it be this? Did they check this? Etc., etc. For instance, she said, did they do a scan to check for tumors? Had they checked Angela's thyroid? Things like that. And James responded, quote, "They did an MRI of her head because brain tumors are in the family. They did an ultrasound of her heart. They did a head CT, and they did a chest and abdomen CT. And everything has come back negative so far. So I guess that's good. No tumor is a good thing, right?" End quote. Now keep in mind, this is coming from a man who's very intelligent. Whatever else we can say about him, to me there's no doubt James Craig is clearly smart. In fact, a lot of his staff described him as the smartest person they knew. I mean, they also described him as one of the kindest people they knew, so you can pretend to be kind. I feel like you can't pretend to be smart. So this comment that he's making, no tumor's a good thing, right? To me, it comes off as disingenuous. It reminds me of that clip from the movie Grandma's Boy where he's playing the video game and he does really well. And then he says, "New high score. Did I break it?"
Woo! That game is fun. Oh, my God.
A new high score!
What does high score mean? New high score, is that bad? What does that mean? Did I break it?
Anyone with a brain would know that having no tumor is a good thing, but he has to play this role of being a concerned husband who's sitting at his wife's bedside, worried, sick, exhausted, not even able to think clearly, even though in previous and future messages he's rattling off medical terms as if it's a second language that he's fluent in. So Michelle makes some comments about how it's difficult for her to imagine that Angela was so dehydrated that her blood pressure was that low. But, if that's what the doctors say, okay, and she's going to continue to pray for Angela, and she and Ryan are there in case James needs anything. Michelle asked James if Angela had been eating, and he responded, quote, "Let's see, a little bit, but not very much. Today, the only thing she had is 1 cracker, and she threw it up. Yesterday, the only thing she had was a protein shake in the morning, which she threw up, and then some chicken noodle soup for dinner, which she also threw up." End quote. And it's texts like this that makes me think other things are going to come out during the trial, because this was March 10th that he was texting this, and he says that Angela the day before, on March 9th, had a protein shake. Okay, a protein shake that he made her, right? Because a lot of people said James was such a good husband. Every morning he would wake up and make his wife, Angela, a protein shake before they went to work out. So this is once again something that I believe is going to come in play when we have the trial and we have a better timeline. This is just the arrest affidavit who's giving us this information. This is just information that the detectives believed was needed to arrest him, the evidence they needed to arrest him. It's not all the details. So once again, Michelle and James continue to speculate about what could possibly be making Angela that sick. And James said, quote, "If it wasn't my wife, this would be kind of a fun puzzle to try to work out." Exclamation point and end quote. On Saturday, March 11th, the next day, Michelle texted James again asking if there was any news, and James responded, quote, "The doc is going to do some imaging of her gallbladder and some other internal organs to see how they look. Still pretty much the same, though. When I talk to her, she seems like she's in a lot of pain and super, super tired. Of course, all the tests are coming back perfect," end quote. Now, we know that Angela was released from the hospital on March 14th. And on that morning at 6:34 a.m. before Angela went home, Michelle texted James again, asking if there was any update on Angela's condition, to which James responded, quote, "Not really, no answers. She's on oxygen full-time now," end quote. We also know that not only would Angela be discharged from the hospital that night, but then she went back to the hospital the day after she was released on March 15th. Her brother brought her to the hospital this time. And Angela was admitted on March 15th around 11 a.m. And at 12:07 p.m., Michelle texted James to tell him that she and Ryan were there if he needed anything. She asked, "Is Angela conscious?" To which James simply responded, "No." And then randomly, he sends a text after that, which said, quote, "She's not laughing at any of my jokes either, so you know it's really bad," end quote. And I get it. I get that this was probably supposed to be his attempt at a joke because just seconds before that, he said Angela wasn't conscious. And then he says, "It's really bad because she's not laughing at my jokes," which, how could she if she wasn't conscious? So I get it. It was probably a joke. Some people use humor to get through tough situations. So do I. But if my husband was on oxygen and dying in front of me, I don't know if I could have made a joke at that time. It just seems like a weird time to make a joke. So Michelle texted James saying, quote, "I'm scared, Jim. Is that bad to say?" End quote. And James responded, quote, "Not at all. I am too. It's weird not being able to wake her up." End quote. Shortly after this, James sent Michelle Redfern 2 pictures of Angela in her hospital room, in her hospital bed, surrounded by tons of medical staff. And he sent a message that said, quote, "Crash, intubated, 55/44 pulse. Doc says she should be mentally responsive by now, and she's not. Doc says she's very, very worried. Used the word tenuous." End quote. Michelle then tells James that she and her husband and James's business partner, Ryan, they're on their way to the hospital. Now, it's likely that at this time, Michelle and her husband, Ryan, were at 2 separate locations because they drove to the hospital in different cars. And on the way to the hospital, Ryan Redfern received a troubling call from the dental practice that he was a partner in. And this call contained what would become very pertinent information that would give some insight into Angela's mysterious illness. The information originated from a woman named Caitlin, who worked as an office manager at Summerbrook Dental Group. She'd worked there for about 6 months, and she'd witnessed a few events that had caused her to wonder if Angela Craig had been poisoned by her husband, James. Caitlin said that on the morning of March 6th, which remembers the first day that Angela started feeling sick, she knew that James had made Angela a protein shake before they'd both worked out that morning. He'd made it with extra protein because he claimed Angela was feeling sluggish that day. Now, how does Caitlin know that James made Angela a protein shake that morning? I'm going to assume it's because after James and Angela worked out, James went to work where Caitlin was, and probably told her, because he's always trying to seem like a good husband. He probably told her, yeah, Angela just traveled. She had just gotten back from Utah the day before. She was feeling really sluggish. So I put some extra protein in her protein shake this morning to help her out with that. After working out, Angela went home, but she soon began to feel weird. She was feeling faint and dizzy, and we can hear or see Angela describe how she was feeling in her own words through texts that she was exchanging with her husband James that morning. These are texts that I'm going to read to you in a moment. Caitlin said she was also aware that James and Angela were having troubles in their marriage, and James had mentioned wanting to get a divorce. Caitlin said that sometimes recently James had been distant at work, and he would leave during lunchtime because he and his wife Angela were arguing a lot. Allegedly, that's what he told people, that's why he was leaving, because he and Angela were arguing. On March 6th, Angela went to the hospital, but she was released that same day. And Caitlin said that on the evening of March 6th, while she was still at the office working late, James Craig came in, which was strange because it was like close to closing time and there was no patients for James to see. Caitlin also found it strange when instead of going to his office, James went all the way to the end of the hall and began using the computer in exam room 9. Caitlin said she didn't know why he would be doing that because not only did he have his own office, but he had his own office computer in there as well, and a work laptop that he would often bring home with him from work. So she didn't really know why he was doing that, but that's her boss, so she's not going to really question it. Caitlin saw James in that exam room using the computer in the dark, but, at that time, she didn't think too much of it, and she left the office to go home shortly after. But about 30 minutes after she left, Caitlin claims that James Craig sent her a text message telling her he had a personal package that was being sent to the office, and he asked her to make sure that she got it to him and then no one else opened it. Between March 6th and March 13th, which was the day the package would arrive at the dental office, Angela Craig fell ill again and had to be readmitted to the hospital on March 9th, where she stayed for several days until March 14th. While Angela was in the hospital, James was communicating with Caitlin, telling her that things looked really bad, telling her he didn't think Angela was going to make it. But he also was asking her how business was at the dental practice, and Caitlin thought that this was strange, that James was worried about what was happening at his practice while his wife was lying in the hospital, possibly dying. On March 13th, the package that James Craig had been waiting for arrived, but by the time Caitlin got to it, another employee had already opened it. So she took the box intending to seal it back up and deliver it to James in his office herself, but as she was repackaging everything in that box, she saw a biohazard sticker. And the biohazard sticker was on a cylindrical container that had the words potassium cyanide on the label. Now, assuming that she was looking at a substance that had some medical use or application in dentistry, Caitlin sealed the box back up and hand-delivered it to James in his office. Later that day, Caitlin saw James walking down the hallway as he left, holding a cylindrical canister that was wrapped in brown paper. But Caitlin had never seen potassium cyanide be delivered to the office before, and she was curious. Thank God she was curious. She wanted to know what it could possibly be used for. Maybe she's trying to get more education, or maybe she's suspicious of James Craig. Who knows? But either way, she Googled it. And during that internet search, Caitlin realized that the side effects of ingesting potassium cyanide were sort of similar to the symptoms that Angela Craig was having, including nausea, vomiting, low blood pressure, etc., etc. Now, we have actually talked about potassium cyanide before in other cases, specifically the Chicago Tylenol poisonings from 1982, but let's have a quick refresher of what it is and what it does. Potassium cyanide is a chemical compound that can be fatal if ingested, and it looks very much like sugar. It's white and granular in appearance, but it releases hydrogen cyanide gas, a highly toxic chemical asphyxiant that interferes with the body's ability to use oxygen. Now, according to the CDC, exposure to potassium cyanide can be rapidly fatal. It has whole body systemic effects, especially affecting organ systems that are the most sensitive to low oxygen levels, such as the central nervous system, which would be your brain, the cardiovascular system, which would be your heart, your blood vessels, and the pulmonary system, which would be the lungs. So basically, the most important systems, the ones you need to, live. You need those things, all of those things, your heart, your brain, your lungs, kind of important, the most important. Potassium cyanide does have practical applications, and it's often used commercially for fumigation, which is an issue, as well as electroplating and extracting gold and silver from ores. But typically, it's just considered to be very poisonous, and surprisingly, it's kind of easy to get. It's kind of easy to buy. Early symptoms of cyanide poisoning include lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, confusion, restlessness, and anxiety, along with rapid breathing. And if not diagnosed quickly, very quickly, ingesting potassium cyanide can and usually will lead to death. So when Angela was discharged from the hospital on March 14th, Caitlin claims that James told her that Angela had accused him of poisoning her. And Angela had allegedly said something along the lines of, there's certain poisons that they don't test for. Now, once again, this seems odd. It seems odd that James Craig would be telling this to his employee, but we don't have all the details yet. We don't know what their relationship was. Were they close friends? From what we find out later, it seemed like James was kind of squared off against everyone else in the office, and he kind of felt like they were always talking about him and they weren't on his side. So maybe because Caitlin was new, she'd only been there 6 months, he felt like if he got to her early enough, he could have someone on his side, so he was confiding in her. We don't know what their relationship was, but I also think that a lot of what James was saying to Caitlin and others may have been just building a narrative. And what we will come to find out is, yeah, Angela probably did accuse James of poisoning her at some point because James had poisoned Angela 5 years prior. We'll talk about that. So after James said this to her on the 14th, and then Caitlin finds out that Angela's in the hospital again the next day on the 15th, she had to tell someone what she knew. So she called the head office manager, a woman named Jacqueline, told Jacqueline everything she'd seen, everything she suspected, and then Jacqueline called Ryan Redfern, who happened to be on his way to the hospital to see Angela and to comfort her husband, James. Ryan and his wife, Michelle, both arrived to the hospital separately. They went in, they briefly spoke to James, who had to step away to answer a phone call. When James stepped away, Ryan Redfern pulled a nurse to the side, and he told her about the concern that Angela may be suffering from potassium cyanide poisoning, and the person who had poisoned her could have been her own husband, who at that moment, James and Michelle Redfern could see meeting with doctors about Angela's condition and crying. James was crying because the doctor was telling him, like, she's brain dead, and, we're probably going to have to take her off of life support eventually. So James is crying, allegedly upset about this. So after this, Ryan and Michelle left the hospital, and then they got into the same car. Even though they came in different vehicles, most likely they got into the same car so they could talk about what was going on. And, Ryan could be like, listen, Michelle, like, Jacqueline called me. This is what Caitlin saw at the office. Like, what's happening? So while they're sitting in the same car, Craig, he calls Ryan, and when Ryan answered the call, it played over the car speaker because Ryan's phone was connected to the Bluetooth of his car. So both he and Michelle could hear what James was saying. So Ryan's like, hello, and James is like, Ryan, I just heard some disturbing information from the hospital staff. And Ryan was like, yeah, I told them about this package that you had sent to the office. Like, I'm sorry, but it's suspicious, So yes, I told them because hopefully it helps your wife. From the arrest affidavit, it seemed that James and Ryan kind of went back and forth for a few minutes. Like, James was trying to be like, gaslighting Ryan, basically. What are you talking about, And Ryan was like, just stop, say less. So James said, Ryan, like, there's nothing in that box. There's a ring in that box, a ring that I'm planning to surprise Angela with. And Ryan was like, dude, I know there wasn't a ring in the box. And James then retorted, well, joke's on you. I know the box was never opened, so you wouldn't know what was in the box. You're just guessing. And Ryan responded, Uno reverse card, bitch, joke's on you, because the box was opened. I know what's in there, and it ain't no ring. Obviously, that was just, I was paraphrasing, but yeah, that's the way it went. Now, realizing he'd been caught, James admitted that the package did contain potassium cyanide, but it hadn't been his idea to buy it. Angela had asked him to buy it for her because she was unable to do it herself since she didn't have the proper credentials, and being a dentist, being a medical professional, James did. James said he ordered it, but he didn't think Angela was actually going to take it. He described the situation as being similar to a game of chicken. More like a game of cat and mouse, James. And at that point, his business partner and friend, Ryan, was like, dude, stop talking. You should get yourself a lawyer. But it was too late, because as soon as Ryan Redfern had raised the alarms, as soon as he'd voiced his concerns out loud, James Craig was done for. Hospital personnel called the police, and the Major Crime Homicide Unit began an investigation, arriving to the hospital at 12:30 a.m. on March 16th. At that time, they learned that Angela was in the ICU on life support with no brain activity. The doctors said that her prognosis did not look good, and that she might not even make it through the night. That same day, detectives spoke with Sydney Romero, a CPS caseworker who had met with James and his children. Once again, it doesn't say why in this arrest affidavit, why Sydney Romero, the CPS worker, met with James and the kids. But I expect that the hospital called her in after they'd heard what Ryan Redfern had to say so that Sydney could speak to the kids, speak to James, kind of get an indication of what was going on here and if the kids may be in danger. Sydney Romero told police that during her conversation with James Craig, he'd made some statements that stood out to her, like red flags. She said that James had told her that Angela was suicidal and had been for some time. In fact, James claimed that just in the last few months, he had needed to personally revive his wife several times because after he'd asked her for a divorce in December of 2022, her depression and suicidal ideations had gotten worse. So she'd been depressed and wanted to harm herself before he asked her for a divorce, but afterwards, it just went downhill. Strangely, though, James had never reported any of these incidences. He never tried to get his wife medical help or bring her to the hospital or get her into therapy. He had not mentioned the fragility of Angela's mental state to anyone, actually. And James Craig told Sydney Romero that he knew Angela's toxicology report was going to come back as positive for some substances because he believed that his wife had intentionally been trying to overdose on opioids and other unknown substances. Actually, just one other unknown substance. He said, I know she was trying to overdose on opioids and another unknown substance, but he just didn't know what that unknown substance was, right? And Sydney Romero told detectives that she felt this was James attempting to create a cover story for what had actually happened to Angela, because none of Angela's children mentioned anything about their mother being depressed or any incidences where Angela had tried to harm herself. And Sydney felt that these types of things and the way that James described them would not have gone unnoticed by others in the household. She thought it was very unlikely that James Craig would be the only one aware of Angela's struggles and attempts to end her own life. And I mean, clearly it's a cover attempt because he's like, yeah, you're going to find something in her system. I just don't know what it is. In case they find what he poisoned her with, he's setting it up. Yeah, she was taking some stuff. I don't know what. Hopefully you can tell me, but I don't know. While the police were building their case, James Craig was doing damage control with his friend and business partner, Ryan Redfern. So on the morning of March 16th, 2023, James sent Ryan several lengthy text messages attempting to gaslight Ryan into oblivion. Truly, I've never seen anything like it. So the texts say, quote, "Good morning, Ryan. Thank you for taking my patient load today. I want to make an urgent plea to you. If we were ever friends, please do this favor for me. Please don't talk to anyone about what we talked about last night, including any law enforcement officers. You are under no obligation to answer their questions unless you are served a subpoena, and you will do more damage than good to my family by continuing to insert yourself into this. Angela is gone, and I am devastated. There's nothing that can bring her back, and I want desperately to tell you all of the details so that you can better understand what's going on behind the scenes with her. There's so much that you don't know that I wish you did. If you knew everything, this would make so much sense to you, but there's no use in telling you right now. You and I have a history of you and the other partners and Jackie all talking about me behind my back and deciding what you think is best. And then you're always the fall guy that has to pull the trigger or tell me what you've all decided about me. In fact, yesterday, you didn't even come to me. I had to seek you out. You've never given me the advantage of talking with me first. You just decide and act and hope I'll pick up the pieces later. This is a pattern in our business dealings and now has become a factor in our personal dealings. Let me paint a picture for you of what this has done. Yesterday, I had to tell my kids their mom was not going to wake up, and they were there to say their final goodbyes. That was at 6:45 p.m. The hospital said we could bring the kids up to say goodbye at that time, but because of the investigation you opened up by your incomplete information, the hospital made those poor, grieving, hysterical kids wait until after 10 p.m. to see their mom. After an hour or so of saying goodbye to her, we went home just before midnight, only to have our house sealed against our entry by the police. Instead of getting to go home and find comfort, they were met with flashing lights and cold, unfeeling cops. And the kids, scared and confused, had to go sleep at the home of a ward member. Family is starting to come into town today, and I have to tell them they can't come to my house and try to explain why. I have to hire a homicide attorney to make sure I don't end up being painted in the light that some hungry DA is anxious to paint me in, because I'm most likely going to be charged, even though that is absolutely not what happened. Ryan, I understand why you did what you did. I do. I get it. But if you had come to me personally, man to man, instead of talking to everyone else about what you thought you knew, I might have let you in on some details that would have made you less likely to cause this horrible storm. Man, Ryan, if you had only put me higher on your list of priorities instead of putting everyone else's opinions and gossip ahead of me. For that, I am very, very mad at you. I have talked to you about this multiple times, but you don't seem to care. And now what you thought was responsible has become reckless and so destructive. And so I'm asking, if there was ever any love in your heart for me, please don't make this any worse by talking to any officers or anyone else about this unless you are legally forced to. And whoever else on the team you think is going to be questioned, I would ask that you privately ask them to honor this request too. Also, please do not respond to this text message until I text you again. End quote. Like the audacity that it takes to be this desperate, while at the same time being this entitled. It is a masterclass in manipulation and gaslighting. The end goal for someone like James Craig is to gain and maintain control over another individual, and they do this by continually distorting reality to keep the other person in a constant state of confusion and self-doubt, making them question not only their own judgment and their own intuition, but if done properly, an effective gaslighter can actually make you question concrete facts, things you're 100% sure you already know, things you've seen with your very own eyes and heard with your very own ears. This was a sandwich of like asking for a favor, guilt, anger, gaslighting, asking for a favor. Knowing that Ryan Redfern is probably a decent guy, James tries to make him feel guilty for speaking the truth. He says, "You're harming my family. You're harming my children when they're already going through the pain of losing their mother," who, by this way, at this point wasn't even dead, by the way. You wouldn't know that from the text because James says, Angela's gone. Nothing can bring her back. Well, she was still alive. She was on life support and brain dead. Like, I get it. But she was still alive. And it's so frustrating because I've talked to people like this and I know people like this, and it's triggering because he's saying, like, because of what you've done, these poor kids who are sobbing and they're losing their mother, they had to wait hours before they could even say goodbye to her. And then when they just wanted to go home and be in comfort, we couldn't do that either because the house was sealed because of this investigation you started. No, dude, this investigation you started, James Craig. You started this investigation, and you're literally trying to make your friend Ryan feel bad and feel like shit and feel guilty for what's happening to your kids when what's happening to your kids is your doing and only your doing. It's crazy. Like, it's so triggering. And then he pulls the old, there's so much more to this than you understand. I know it looks this way, but if you know what was happening behind closed doors, you'd see it's more complicated than that. Let me try to buy myself some time by just dangling this carrot in front of you and telling you that there's so much more that you don't know. And if you knew this stuff, everything would make sense to you and you wouldn't be doing this. But I can't tell you right now. Of course not. I can't tell you right now. But I'm going to tell you later. But until I tell you, don't do anything. And then James brings in this random old grudge that has nothing to do with Angela or the situation that he currently finds himself in. He's like, I know you and the rest of the people in the office talk behind my back, and you've never had the respect for me to talk to my face or to deal with your grievances with me man to man. But if you had done that, I would have made everything clear for you. But you didn't, as usual, because you suck. And you've never put me first. And you've never put me high on your priority list. And because you don't know how to communicate and you've acted in this irresponsible way, you've made a bad situation worse. You were reckless. He says at the end, you were reckless. James is literally talking to his friend and his business partner like he's a small child being scolded. And James has a problem with the respect factor on behalf of Ryan towards him. It looks like there's one person in this situation who doesn't respect the other, and that person is James. Now, the whole point of this for James is to not finally air out old grievances and communicate with Ryan about his feelings, but just to make Ryan stop and question what he knows to be true long enough so that James could figure out what to do, so that Ryan wouldn't talk to the police and James could figure out how to spin everything in his favor. The morning of March 16th, 2023, the Aurora police got 3 search warrants, one for the Craig home, one for James Craig's dental practice, and one for the home that James and his children were staying in, which was the home of a family friend. The detectives were also able to get their hands on the cell phones of James and Angela Craig, and in Angela's phone, they saw that Angela and James had been texting regularly during the previous few weeks. Angela, funnily enough, had James's cell phone number in her phone under the contact the boy, which is so fitting because I think that James probably was one of those people that acts irresponsibly. We can tell he's irresponsible with his money financially because he's going through all of these bankruptcies with his practice, his office. And Ryan Redfern, who had known James for over 20 years, said the way he would explain or describe James would be that he's like impulsive, that he has no fear, that he's like always taking risks. which sounds kind of like a kid. Now, the texts in the arrest affidavit between Angela and James, they started on March 1st. We don't know what kind of conversations Angela and James were having before this, but we know that they were texting on March 1st. And at this time, Angela was in Utah visiting her sister Toni. She wouldn't return to Colorado until March 5th. Since we don't have access to the previous texts, we have to use some context clues to figure out what had transpired between Angela and James before this text. And according to the affidavit, the following text was mainly about James's healing and counseling. So Angela texted James on March 1st saying, quote, "Your healing and happiness, this marriage, is more important than my day. You are more important than my day." End quote. This is going to be a heartbreaking portion of the video, at least it was for me when I was reading through these texts. I was reminded of Shanann Watts. I was reminded of a woman in a marriage with a man, and that man had started to pull away and turn cold. And this woman was trying to do everything and anything to bring him back, to let him know that their marriage and their joint venture into life was far more important than her individual happiness or well-being. I wanted to let you know what James Craig had done before I started reading these text messages to you, because when you hear them, knowing what he was planning and what he was doing, what he was accused of doing, it's absolutely pathological. And from what I can tell, because she arrived in Utah on March 1st, she's probably referring to conversations that they had had before she had left, right? Probably the night before she had left, they had talked. And most likely James had texted her that day and saying like, "Oh, how's your day going?" And because she's still thinking about him and the fact that he's hurting or he's going through something, and because she loves him and because she wants to be a good wife and because she wants to have the kind of marriage where they can support each other, she's like, "Don't worry about how my day's going. Like, how are you? You are more important than my day. This marriage is more important than my day." So James responds back saying, quote, "Thank you. I know you are getting ready to go out and spend some time with Toni, and I would like to ask that you keep last night's conversation details just between you and I. I trust Toni, but it was hard for me to even tell you that stuff. I'm definitely not ready for anyone else to hear it." End quote. And Angela responded, quote, "Of course. I wasn't planning to talk about any of it. I haven't actually talked to Toni about any of the last few months since that initial conversation." End quote. Once again, we don't know what the initial conversation was or the totality of what had been happening between Angela and James in the past months. If Angela is being honest with James here and being truthful when she says she hasn't been talking to her sister Toni about anything that's been going on in the past months or any conversations she and her husband have had, we may never find out because he may never admit it. But I have a sneaking suspicion she probably did let Toni in on some things. But according to these texts, we get an indication that maybe Angela and James were having some marital problems in the past months. But this was March. James had been telling everyone that he'd asked Angela for a divorce in December of 2022, so that could be what she's talking about. However, both Angela and James in these text messages seem invested in keeping the marriage together. They both seem interested in talking to each other and understanding each other to return back to a place of love and acceptance for each other. They both seem invested in it. They both do. You'll see from the text. But really, that's not true. Only Angela was, because James was simply pretending to work on himself and work on his relationship with his wife. And from what I can tell from these messages, be vulnerable and let her in on things that had happened to him in his past or his childhood or, his feelings that maybe he had held back before. So hopefully she could better understand him. And whatever he told her placed himself in the role of a victim. And so she's feeling bad for him. And the police would later talk to Angela's sister, Toni, and Toni said that, yes, her and Angela were very close. They spoke almost every single day. And Toni also said that the marriage between Angela and James had always been tumultuous, not just the past couple of months, but for years. And over the years, James had stepped out on his marriage more than once. He had several affairs with other women. Toni also said that James had told Angela that he'd been addicted to pornography since he was 12, and Angela had tried to leave the marriage multiple times over the past 16 years, but James wouldn't let her. He always talked her into staying. He always convinced her to give him another chance. Also, as we've had some indication of, the dental practice was in financial trouble, dire financial trouble, according to Toni, to the point where Angela was working at the practice sometimes because they couldn't afford to hire somebody, and so she was like helping out. And Angela had complained to her sister that despite all of this, James had recently been to Las Vegas, where he'd lost $2,000 while he was gambling. But the following texts between James and Angela seemed to indicate that once again, he'd convinced her to stay. He had convinced her to give him another chance, even though he was telling people that they were having problems and getting divorced. He was luring her into a false sense of security. So apparently he didn't want her to know that they were having problems and getting divorced. He just wanted everybody else to think that. Reading through these texts, not knowing what James Craig is accused of, you'd think he was the most perfect, the most doting husband and father, which is exactly what his goal was, in my opinion. He wanted anyone who read them to not believe he was capable of poisoning his wife, to not believe that he was capable of poisoning his wife to the point where she would die a slow and painful death. The texts on Monday, March 6th, start at 6:59 a.m. James texted Angela and said, quote, "Thank you so much for making my drink this morning. I just love you. I hope you have a great day, and I'm so glad you're back in town." End quote. Remember, Angela had been visiting her sister in Utah from March 1st to March 5th, and James is saying that Angela made him a drink that morning. He does not say that he made her a protein shake. But based on the following messages, we can conclude that he did, right? Because Angela responded, quote, "You're welcome, baby. I love you too. I think my body is not letting the caffeine this morning either. My stomach feels fine, but my head feels funny and dizzy. Very strange." End quote. Now, James responded, quote, "It's been a week since caffeine for you. Maybe your body is saying, no, thank you. I did a full big scoop of the B vitamins. Is that how much you normally take? I'm super shaky." End quote. So we get this, that James has made Angela a drink, the same way that he's saying she made him a drink. They probably made each other's drinks or whatever. And when Angela's talking about caffeine, I don't believe she's talking about caffeine like coffee. I think she's talking about pre-workouts that goes into her protein shake. Angela responded, quote, "Oh no, I do a small scoop of the B vitamin mix. It feels really weird." End quote. And James says, quote, "Oops, sorry, baby." End quote. So after James says, "Oops, I put too much B vitamins in, my bad, sorry," Angela responds, quote, "That's okay, it'll wear off. I am dizzy and my eyes don't want to focus, but I can get the stuff done that I need to this morning." End quote. James tells her that she should lie down, and Angela responds, quote, "I'm lying on my face on the mat in my room." End quote. James responds, "You have a bed, and Angela says, quote, "I'm stinky. Just seems excessive for a little extra supplement." End quote. James kind of ignores that statement and he says, quote, "Pearl is flying in this morning to see me. I totally forgot. I think she's flying out today too, though." End quote. Angela ignores this and says to him, quote, "I don't feel right in my head." End quote. James asks, quote, "Do I need to come home?" End quote. And Angela says, quote, "No, this is just weird. I'm dizzy in my head and my eyes are working slowly and my body is responding slowly." End quote. James says, "That sounds really wrong. I'm going to come home. I don't like this." And Angela responds, quote, "You can't. You need to work. I'll just throw on some clothes and sit with the girls and see if it goes away." James responds, quote, "Okay, I'm probably overacting, but I don't like that. I can cancel patients for the morning or move some to Dr. P if needed, so if you change your mind, let me know." End quote. He then talks about she should check her blood pressure. Does she have a blood pressure cuff? Does she get lightheaded when she stands up? Maybe her blood pressure's low. And Angela responds, quote, "It feels more like when I take heavy meds and everything adjusts and moves slowly, like I'm moving in thick gel. My eyes are struggling to stay focused." End quote. James asks her, did she take her blood pressure? He's like, "Listen, if you don't have one there, I can bring one home from work. And also, there's magnesium in the drawer in my bathroom, and you can take that." And then he asks her if she's eaten anything. And Angela responds, quote, "I had my protein shake and magnesium makes me weird. This is not hungry." End quote. James asks her, "Are you nauseous?" And Angela responds, quote, "No, I feel drugged." End quote. And this is how James responds in a very bizarre way. Quote, "Given our history, I know that must be triggering. Just for the record, I didn't drug you. I am super worried though. You really looked pale even before I left, like in your lips even." End quote. So very odd response. Just for the record, I didn't drug you when your wife says she feels drugged. Why is he saying this? He's saying this because 5 years before this, he did drug his wife, Angela. He drugged her to the point where she passed out. And he said the reason he did it was because he was trying to take his own life. And so he didn't want her to stop him. He didn't want her to wake up and stop him from taking his own life, even though clearly that is not what ended up happening because he's here alive today. So Angela does not respond to him saying, like, I didn't drug you, just for the record. So he asks, update, when she doesn't say anything back. She doesn't respond again, and James says, quote, I was plugging your symptoms into Google, and stroke matches some of what you're describing. Do you have weakness in your whole body or just one side? And is it both eyes or just one that feel blurry? End quote. Angela responds, quote, it feels like my whole body and it's tingly and my eyes are struggling to focus. End quote. This is a lack of oxygen. James asks her if she's still laying down, and Angela responds that she just got into bed. He says, okay, good, and Angela responds, my whole body feels so heavy, to which James says, quote, something's really wrong. I'm coming home with a blood pressure cuff. If nothing else, I can at least help the girls stay on track while you rest. He doesn't come home, though, like he says he's going to. He doesn't come home at that moment, at least, because on that same day at 6:05 p.m., James texted, quote, I'm all done and headed home. How are you feeling? End quote. And Angela responds that she's good and her daughter Belle is making grilled cheese. And then he once again says, quote, I'm all done here and headed home now. End quote. Like, yeah, dude, you already said that. And Angela asks, quote, I would like another blessing tonight if there's someone who could help. End quote. And James said, yeah, I'm sure we can find someone. Now, on March 6th, Angela did end up going to the hospital, but she was sent home that same night. And the next day, on March 7th, she texted her husband, quote, you don't have to miss work today. We don't have anywhere to go today, and the girls and I will be fine. I'm starting to think I'm just sick, and this is part of it. I'm going to try my popcorn and Dr. Walker this morning, and we'll see what we can do. So apparently, Dr. Walker is Angela's primary care physician, and she says she should have done that yesterday, gone to her PCP, because the ER is useless, and then she apologizes to James. And James responds, quote, no, you're fine. It did help us rule out a lot of other scarier things, so I'm glad we did it, end quote. So later that day, Angela texts James and says, quote, I don't want to tell you, but I feel like you would be upset if I don't, but I may have passed out a little this morning while standing in the kitchen. I just remember holding onto the island because I was dizzy, and then Violet in my face saying, Mommy. Violet is another one of their children. And James responds, quote, thank you for telling me, but that would have been a good moment to call 911, quote. Angela continues and says, I didn't need to do that. Like, it's weird. My eyes seem to be focusing better today. And he responds, well, that's good, I guess, question mark. Angela says, quote, I woke up with a headache and spots in my eyes. Spots went away. Headache still there. And James responds, sorry, baby, that sounds awful. So Angela continues talking to James, and she's like, listen, my doctor can't get me until Thursday or Friday. I went in, I scheduled an appointment for 3 o'clock on Friday because that's when I would have a ride. Do you think I should change it to Thursday? My head is killing me, and I'm so tired. Making these decisions is really hard. And James says, quote, I think you should do it on Thursday. I'm sorry your head hurts so bad, end quote. Angela responds, I can't drive. Nobody's here to take me. And James says, quote, I can find you a ride. What time could you get the appointment for? End quote. And James is like, well, I can try to find you a ride, and maybe I can give you a ride. I'll ask Dr. P if we can move things around, and, he can take my patients on Thursday. And then he responds back and he's like, quote, actually, Dr. P is out Thursday, so maybe just stick to Friday, end quote. Like, he's trying to push back the time limit that she goes to the doctor. He's trying to, push the time where she goes to get help further and further back. And they just kind of keep going back and forth for a little bit about this. Angela's wondering maybe it's a sinus infection, and James says, do you want me to call in a Z-Pack for you? And she's like, yeah, and the nurse told me there's this other medicine people can take for dizziness, and they're wondering if maybe it's diabetes. And she's like, oh, don't say that. I don't want to be a new diabetic, et cetera, et cetera. And then on Tuesday, March 7th at 2:07 p.m., James sent Angela a message saying, quote, I love you. It was so nice hanging out with you and just watching a show and snuggling. I'm sorry that you still aren't feeling well and that you feel like I'm disappointed about that. I'm not disappointed at all, just feeling empathy for how hard that must be for you. Hopefully things can improve and get better. I'm also so grateful that the last couple of days have allowed me to have more flexibility in my schedule. God really does know what he's doing. Are you feeling anything in particular for dinner tonight or this week? End quote. And Angela responds, I'm having a hard time feeling okay being sick and an even harder time knowing whether that's me or you. I could tell you were worried yesterday, but I guess I just think they sent us home and said nothing was wrong. And you think I should be fine. I realize I could be reliving the past. It's just hard. And frankly, all of this is really scary, and I don't feel like we're addressing that at all. But I don't even remember most of yesterday, so maybe we did address it. I'm a crazy person. I'm not feeling anything particular about food right now. Tony's sending dinner tonight. End quote. So Angela's saying, without saying it, I have a hard time feeling this way and not remembering how I felt when you poisoned me. I have a hard time not reliving the past, and I don't think we're addressing that I feel really, really bad, and you're just kind of acting like I should be okay and that we're going to get past this, and I don't know if we are. Like, I don't know if I'm going to get better. I feel really bad. And he's just kind of trying to, like, act like everything's normal. Like, oh, we snuggled last night. I had such a great time. Like, I wasn't disappointed. And she's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, man. I'm so sick. I don't even remember last night. On Wednesday, March 8th at 7:30 a.m., James texted Angela. This is the next day. And he says, quote, will you please let me know when you're up? I'm nervous about it just being you and the littles. He's nervous because he's been poisoning her, and he's hoping that she dies. And she has not died yet, but he's continuing to poison her, and he does not want her to be dead in the house and have the kids find her that way. That's what I'm thinking is happening here. He's like trying to get an indication. If she doesn't answer him long enough, then he'll either go home or call the police. But he just doesn't, I think, want the kids to walk in on that. Or maybe he doesn't care. But either way, he's trying to get an indication. Is she alive or dead right now? And he does this a lot. He's constantly like touching base while he's out of the house. Like, you okay? Did you fall asleep? What's going on? You alive? What's happening? He literally says at some point, like, are you alive? So she responds to him, and she says, quote, I'm thinking about being up. Julia's coming for a visit later today. So she's in bed still. She's feeling crappy. She's thinking about getting up. And, James is like, well, what are you doing later? And she's like, drinking my drink and sitting on the couch with my ice pack and 2 anxious dogs. No blurred vision or dizziness or anything, mostly just the headache. And he says, well, I guess that's an improvement over the last few days. And she goes, quote, it's possible the headache will go away and I'll feel okay today. So yes, and my sinuses are cleared out and draining. I can breathe again, but it's making everything taste gross. End quote. He says, I'm sorry, but that also sounds like good news, not for him. And she responds, quote, it's okay. It will go away. Just wanted to update you. And I'm hoping you don't worry today. What did you feed Ember this morning? End quote. And, Ember is their bird. They have a bird named Ember. And Angela's like, okay, I just wanted to know because she's being really noisy, like she's being annoying, blah, blah, blah. So later on in that day, Angela says, how are you today? To James. And he responds, so busy. I'm planning to come home and have lunch with you, though. And Angela responds, am I eating lunch? I'll need to gear up for that. I'm glad I'll get to see you again, end quote. And James says, quote, I'm glad too. I'll need to ask you what you're hungry for and bring it to you. I'm kind of just feeling like a smoothie or something, end quote. She's not dying. She's getting better. So he wants to come home and have lunch with her so he can poison something again. And what's easier to poison? Well, you can't poison a salad. You can't poison a sandwich. I guess you could, but it'd be a lot harder. What's easier to poison? Well, smoothie, like he's been doing. Angela responds, quote, I'm not feeling anything. Don't bring anything. I'll eat something here. End quote. And then he asks, how's your headache? And she says, quote, better, but it still hurts. I'll probably just need a shower and some sleep and some food. I hate your bird today. She won't be quiet. End quote. On Wednesday, March 8th at 12:11 p.m., Angela texts James and says, hi, baby. I love your face. And he responds, how you doing? He doesn't care if she loves him. He just wants to know if the poison is working. And she says, good. She's just waiting for Julia, who I don't know who Julia is, but probably a friend. She says she's trying to share her vital stats with James so he can see something even when she's asleep. I'm sure she's talking about her Apple Watch. And she's saying her head hurts still. Later, James keeps texting her and he's like, checking in again. How are you doing? And then he says, you're scary, because she's not responding. And Angela says, quote, sorry, baby, I fell asleep on the couch. Then I woke up. Now I'm hungry. End quote. And James is like, I waited an entire minute, Ange. And she says, thank you for checking up on me. I love you. And he said, I love you too. I like checking on you. I like when you're feeling shitty and I have to check in and make sure you haven't died yet. And then later he texts her again, how you doing? She doesn't respond right away, but then sends some of her vital stats, which I think she's getting from her watch. Later that day, James texts her again, how you doing? She doesn't answer. And then he says, quote, I'm going to trust that you're just sleeping and not dead somewhere. I just finished up with what I needed to do at work. I just left the office. I'm going to stop at King Soopers on the way home and grab a couple of ingredients to make dinner tonight. Love you. Okay, all done with groceries. I'm heading home to make you some dinner. End quote. So he makes her dinner Wednesday night. I think that he probably poisons her again in the dinner because March 9th is when she returns to the hospital. And on March 9th at 7:17 a.m., James texted Angela and said, how are you doing? Because he wants to see Is my poison working? And Angela responds, quote, I feel super tired, but I left my phone on my lap, so I hope I feel it if you text. And James responded, okay, thank you. He texts her later and says, are you nauseous? I'm reading up on blood pressure, on low blood pressure. And she says, not today. She says, quote, I'm cold, super tired, weak, shaky, and dizzy, end quote. And he responds, super thirsty? And she responds, quote, I've been drinking stuff all morning, so who knows? He asks, quote, blurred vision, end quote. She says, no. And he says, quote, I'm having a hard time concentrating this morning. And she says, I'm sorry, I'm just sleepy. He's saying, I'm having a hard time concentrating because I'm worried about you. And she's apologizing to him. And he says, quote, that's okay. You don't have to say sorry. How are you doing now? He's checking in more and more because now he knows. He probably upped the poison ratio. Like I said, we're not going to find this stuff out until the trial if he ever admits to it. But he probably put more in there and he's waiting for it to take its toll. A little while later, he says, did you eat anything this morning? Baby, Ange, are you there? She responds, hi, baby, sleeping. And he goes, phew. Like you're relieved? Okay, stop. She said, quote, I ate my protein fables and some crackers. I'm down to 140, but feeling pretty crappy, end quote. He said, I'm sorry you're feeling so crappy. I hope they figure this out. How are you doing? And at this point, Angela's in the hospital on March 9th, but James isn't there with her. He says he's at work. But we find out later, maybe he's not at work. At 3:32 p.m. on Thursday, March 9th, James texted Angela and said, quote, man, baby, you've got to stop scaring me like this. I love you so much and I'm not used to all of this excitement, end quote. She responds, quote, I promise you cardio. I'm in room 212. Viv just texted about dinner tomorrow. My head is killing me, so can you please respond to them, end quote. James says he's on it. James starts talking about random stuff, like talking about their kids and like play dates and things like that. And Angela keeps bringing it back to how she's feeling because she's dying. She's feeling horrible. She's been poisoned and she keeps bringing it back to that. And on Friday, March 10th, they're still texting and James is making jokes, right? Like he's making jokes because she's sending him her vitals. She's telling him what the doctors are saying. He's also, I think, has access to her vitals through her iWatch. And he says something like, quote, wow, standing is really a cardiovascular workout for you. I think you're in zone 3. LOL, like, end quote, like he's basically like making jokes about how like her heart rate is so high. And she says, my head hurts so bad. And he says, I'm so sorry. Have they given you anything for it? I'm going to lay down for about an hour in case you're trying to reach me. No, he was not laying down. James was not laying down. Friday, March 10th at 1:13 p.m., he texts her again. Is your headache any better? We're heading to the orthodontist now. She says a tiny bit, but not really. He said, I'm so sorry. Have any of the other test results come back? Also, are the doctors saying if you're going home today or not? He wants to know when she's coming home. We know that she doesn't go home until the 14th, but he wants to know because he has no idea and he's doing something and he's with somebody and he would like to know when he's going to have to stop being with that person. Later, Angela asks, like, how's everything at home? And he says, quote, I'm fine. It's really busy and crazy, but that's always the case when you're not around. I want to be up there with you 24/7. I love you and I miss you and I'm so worried. I wish you were healthy enough to come home tonight and snuggle me. But thank you for staying so I can feel you're being cared for by professionals, end quote. Angela asks him to bring deodorant when he comes, and later that night at 7:03 p.m., he texts her again and says, quote, I love you. I'm excited to have you home again. I'm kind of feeling a little bit like I'm drowning, but I'm doing my best, end quote. Angela responds and says, I'm sure you're doing great. So my BP was just 145/73. I can't win. And James responds, oh my gosh, I'm going to head over and hang out with you for about an hour. He continues and he says, or should I say I'm going to hang out with you until I feel like I'm falling asleep and then I'll come back home and do exactly that, but I want to see you again today, end quote. An hour? Like your wife's in the hospital, like dying, and you can only go for an hour. That's because he was doing something with somebody else. Oh my God, it gets worse. So later, Friday at like 8:59 p.m., Angela responds and says, thank you for coming back. I miss you so much and it's nice to have some time. I love you. And he says, you're welcome. I wish I could have stayed longer. I love you and I'm so glad you seem to be doing better. I hope you're able to at least get some water or Crystal Light down. Did he bring her Crystal Light with more poison in it? That's what I want to know. Did he bring her a bottle of Crystal Light with more poison in it? So on Saturday, March 11th at 12:32 a.m., James texts his wife, Angela, quote, I just woke up dreaming about making love to you. I love you and I want you, end quote. So this continues on in this way for quite a while. They're texting back and forth like this. But like I said, once you know that he's poisoned her, that he wants her to die, these texts seem something like a sociopath would write. It's bad enough to want to kill your wife, but to continue like telling her you love her and you woke up like dreaming of making love to her and you love cuddling with her and you can't wait till she comes home, when that's not what you're hoping at all and that's not what's happening at all. You're literally like torturing her, making her die a slow, painful death. She's so sick and you don't even want to like spend time with her in the hospital at that point, knowing that she's going to die because you know you want to kill her and you know you're going to do it no matter what. Knowing she's going to die, you don't even want to spend like her last days with her. It's just insane. But the most damning evidence against Dr. James Craig would be found when detectives visited Summerbrook Dental Group, specifically Exam Room 9, where Caitlin, the office manager, had seen James using the computer the evening of March 6th, the same day that Angela had started feeling sick, the same day she went to the hospital, and according to the timeline, right after she was discharged. James was there at the office using the computer in Exam Room 9. So detectives took the hard drive from the computer in that exam room, and they found out that James Craig had used this computer to create a new email account on February 27th, 2023. The new email was jimandwaffles@gmail.com, and this email would not be found on any other device that Jim owned. Besides the computer in Exam Room 9. It wasn't on his phone, it wasn't on his office computer, it wasn't on his personal laptop, nothing. It was just on the computer in Exam Room 9, which remember is the last exam room all the way down a dead-end hall in that office. And beginning on February 27th, James began searching for things on the internet and buying things on the internet. On February 27th, James searched for chemical suppliers in Aurora, Colorado. What else did he search for? Well, he searched for things like, where can I buy arsenic? How to purchase arsenic metal? Is arsenic disulfide poisonous? Where to purchase pure arsenic? In Denver, Colorado. How many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human? From that search, the last search, how many grams of arsenic will kill a human, James clicked on a link which brought him to information about what could be a lethal dose of arsenic in humans, letting him know that less than 1/8 of a teaspoon would be fatal to a healthy adult. He continued searching for local chemical suppliers, also asking what arsenic could be used for and was arsenic detectable in an autopsy. This Google search led to a webpage from the Carlson Company Incorporated that proclaimed to tell you all you need to know about arsenic, including the symptoms, which are, headaches, muscle cramps, dizziness, nausea, but also, quote, even though arsenic is detectable in autopsies, it takes a sense of direction to be able to do that. Unless there is possibility or suspicion of a specific poison, the chances of discovery are almost none. Due to the symptoms, most of such cases are signed off as renal failure, end quote. The webpage also told James that a victim of arsenic poisoning could go into shock and die a slow, painful death due to kidney failure. So he knew what his wife was going to feel. Next, James watched some YouTube videos with riveting titles such as the top 5 most dangerous chemicals on Earth and top 5 undetectable poisons that show no signs of foul play. Included on that list were both cyanide and arsenic, with the video telling us that arsenic is virtually undetectable besides using the Marsh test, and that arsenic is often used in murder and mystery. Also, he watched videos called How to Make Poison and the top 10 deadliest plants. They can kill you. And this video told James about a plant called oleander, a dense, fast-growing evergreen shrub that is incredibly toxic to human and plants. And not only did James look up oleander after seeing it in this video, he also looked up how to make poison from it, which led him to information on oleandrin, the compound found in the oleander plant, which accounts for much of oleander's toxicity. And then James Googled how to buy oleander. Also, remember that James Craig had made a purchase on the same day, February 27th. He made a purchase from Amazon, and he made it using his Jim and Waffles Gmail account. What was that purchase? It was arsenic, allegedly the same arsenic that he would put into his wife Angela's protein shake on the morning of March 6th when she started to feel sick. Because remember, James ordered the arsenic on February 27th. It shows that it got delivered to his mailbox to his home on March 4th, and Angela, who had been out of town since March 1st, returned to Aurora, Colorado on March 5th. And then she went to the hospital on March 6th, but she was released the same day because the arsenic hadn't done the trick and James Craig needed to try something else, which is why on March 8th at 6:57 p.m., James ordered something else from a company called Midland Scientific. The item purchased showed as being something called Sigma 207810 25G. but that turns out to be the technical term for potassium cyanide. And then James communicated impatiently for the next few days with a woman named Casey Rodriguez, who was an employee of Midland Scientific. Now, in the original order, James had written, quote, hopefully this is in stock and I can come pick it up tomorrow, March 9th. But then Casey Rodriguez wrote back the morning of March 9th that her company needed to verify why James needed this incredibly dangerous substance. The email said, quote, our product screening team would like a usage statement for what you will be using this item for. Please provide that as soon as possible, end quote. And a few minutes later, Casey sent another email which said, quote, hi James, we do not have this in stock, but our supplier does and can ship overnight for delivery tomorrow, end quote. So James Craig responded to Cassie about what he was ordering the potassium cyanide for, and he lied, of course. On Thursday, March 9th, while James Craig is texting his wife about how he's worried about her and is she okay and he loves her, this and that, he sends Cassie an email around noon. He says, quote, thanks, Cassie. I am a surgeon and I perform craniofacial reconstruction. Rarely, the prosthetics that we use contain metals that patients are intolerant to, causing a severe localized contact immune response. We are investigating whether electroplating with a thin layer of alternative metals will eliminate this problem. This chemical is just part of that process. If this is successful, we hope to publish a paper in the archives of the National Institutes of Health, specifically the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research. My ADA CERP number is, and then he starts giving his credentials to show that he is actually, supposed to be ordering this chemical or allowed to order this chemical. And then he says, I hope we can still get this overnighted. I'm teaching a course tomorrow and Saturday and would love to demonstrate this process, Dr. Craig. But unfortunately for James Craig, he wasn't going to get the potassium cyanide the next day. He wasn't going to get it as soon as he needed it, and he starts to get a little agitated. Cassie responds to him on March 9th at 1:29 p.m. and she says, Dr. Craig, thank you for that fascinating information. Our supplier confirmed stock and informed me it should be able to go out today for delivery tomorrow. I will keep following up with them throughout the rest of the day for tracking. Thank you. James responds right after that, like 20 or 40 minutes later, you've been the best. Thank you. He's so pumped. He's so excited. He's about to get it. And he's like, Cassie's awesome. She's helping me. Cassie responds, quote, you're welcome. I was just informed by our product screening department that they would prefer the usage statement on the attached form. If you don't mind filling that out and returning to me at your earliest convenience, I would really appreciate it. So Cassie had actually attached to the original email asking for, his reason for needing the product, a form that he was supposed to fill out, but instead of filling out that form, he just responded in email form, like writing back. Cassie sends another email to James on Thursday, March 9th at 3:52 p.m., and she says, hello, I was following up with our supplier on this again, and unfortunately was told since you are a new end user in their system, it will take another day for them to get it set up and review. So it will not be able to ship out until tomorrow. I sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. Please let me know how you would like to proceed. So James then fills out the form that he's supposed to fill out, he signs it, etc., etc. And then when he finds out that he's a new user, so he can't get it overnighted, he said, quote, oh man, so inconvenient. Well, ship it out anyway. The course is Friday and Saturday, so I'll shuffle some things around and make sure I can utilize it on Saturday. What method will it ship? And will it ship for a Saturday delivery? End quote. He doesn't have a course he's teaching. He just wants it sooner than later because his wife's in the hospital, but she's getting better and she's not dying, and he wants to make sure to get the job done. Cassie responds, quote, yes, I'm so sorry. It's been set for next day air. I will reach out and tell them to do a Saturday delivery. End quote. James responds, quote, thank you so much. I will be sure I'm there to receive it. Now it's going to his office, right? And on Friday, March 10th at 10:47 a.m., James emails Cassie and asks if she has tracking for that shipment. She doesn't respond until about 1:30 p.m. And at that time, Cassie says, quote, hi, Dr. Craig. I'm so sorry for the delay in my response. I've had to get with my management to contact our supplier and escalate this. I do finally see the order on their website and tracking should be available in a couple of hours. I will keep checking on this for you. End quote. She sends him another email at 4:02 p.m. on March 10th, and it says, Dr. Craig, per our supplier, we were able to set up a shipment for overnight for delivery on Saturday, 3/11 for this order. At this time, the order is in the delivery process, but tracking has not yet been made available, and our offices are closed on Saturday. The earliest we would be able to provide you with a tracking number would be Monday, 3/13. I do apologize for the delay and for any inconvenience. I truly hope that this makes it to you in time on Saturday. Please let me know if it does not." End quote. And as Cassie is sending James this email saying like they can't have tracking until Monday, he's sending her an email asking any tracking info yet? And then he responds 4 or 2 minutes after that and says, quote, "I think we were both sending emails to each other at the same time. Thank you for following up on this. So they know that it has been shipped, but they don't have a tracking info yet. Is that about right? Yeah, and they won't have the tracking info until Monday, but it is set to deliver tomorrow, right?" End quote. Talk about being desperate here for some cyanide. Cassie responded, "Yes, that's correct." Now, on Saturday, March 11th at 7:19 p.m., James Craig's pissed, okay? And he sends an email to Cassie and says, quote, "Wow, it's 7:30 at night, and I've been waiting in my office all day for the shipment. Looks like it didn't come. I wish they would have just told me they weren't going to be able to get it to me overnight. Please send me the tracking information when you get it, Dr. Craig." End quote. So obviously, this is the package that James Craig told Cassie he had ordered for personal use, but it was coming to the office. So Cassie Rodriguez from the company, she responds and said she was sorry it didn't get to him on time, but it did ship. It was expected for Saturday delivery. Must have been some transit delays, which unfortunately is out of their hands, and she gives him a FedEx tracking number. And James responds, quote, "It's not your fault. I was just feeling frustrated and needed somebody to vent to. Looks like it's out for delivery this morning, so hopefully we'll see this package soon. Thanks for your help." End quote. So he's going to have it soon. He's excited now. He's happy. He's not mad at Cassie anymore. And that potassium cyanide did actually reach James's office on Monday, March 13th, which is consistent with the office manager, Caitlin, who actually gave the package to James herself when she saw it had been opened and she saw that it contained potassium cyanide. But keep in mind, James also made another purchase on March 6th. He made a purchase for 3 oleandrin 1 milligram items. He paid $330 for it. The invoice date was March 10th, 2023. Luckily, this oleandrin, this toxin, did not reach James because by the time it was kind of getting close to being delivered to him, the police already figured out what he was doing. They interfered with the delivery and they were able to collect that package. Now let's talk about the alleged reason that James did all of this. The alleged reason he wanted to poison his wife Angela and get her out of the way. And according to police and prosecutors, that reason was another dentist named Karen who lived in Texas. Apparently, these two had been carrying on a relationship. They were having an affair. She was married. He was married. But she would often fly into town to see him, and he would fly out to see her. And listen, this woman's personal information has been put out all over the internet. It's actually kind of blowing my mind. Her last name, the practice she works for, the city she lives in. There's a picture of her and her husband and children on the internet. I'm disgusted by it because, like, I get it. No one wants to like the other woman, but there's no sign or evidence that Karen had any idea what James was planning to do to his wife, Angela. There's no evidence of that at all. So to put her on blast and to put pictures of her kids out there on the internet is disgusting, and I'm sickened by the media. Not all media publications did this, but some did, and I'm sickened by it, honestly. So on that Jim and Waffles Gmail, police also found emails between James and Karen. And it said that some of these emails were intimate in nature and contained sexually explicit conversations, but there was also travel plans within the email. And these travel plans showed that Karen, James's girlfriend, traveled from Austin, Texas to Denver, Colorado between March 8th and 10th of 2023. This kind of overlapped with Angela being in the hospital during March 9th through the 14th. The arrest affidavit says, quote, "It appeared that James had Karen visit him while his wife was in the hospital sick." End quote. So while James was sending texts to Angela like, "Are you okay? Are you awake? Stop worrying me like this. Are you alive?" he was with Karen. So the second flight itinerary in that email shows that Karen once again traveled to Colorado between March 16th and March 20th of 2023. This flight was purchased on March 4th, 2023, which was the same day that the arsenic was delivered to James's house while his wife Angela was out of town. So clearly he planned for Angela to be dead by this point, so that he could spend time with Karen without having to explain to Angela where he was. He planned for Angela to be dead by the point Karen arrived in Colorado on March 16th, but Angela wasn't. She was on life support at the time, and she wasn't dead yet. The arrest affidavit says a follow-up email from Karen on March 16th, 2023 suggested that James had told her something had happened to Angela. Karen sent James an email explaining how sorry she was for him and that she wished she was helping him and not pulling him away. So listen to this email, because once again, we don't know what the context of the conversation between James and Karen was before. Like, was James saying, oh, my wife's on life support and we have to pull the plug and she's gonna die and I really need to be with you right now. Like, good thing I had you flown in because you're here in Colorado and I need you right now. And Karen responded, quote, "Hi, honey. I'm so sorry for what has transpired this week in your world. I am sorry I am not a part of your world to be of more help to you, and instead I am pulling you away. This is so hard. I want to be and do whatever I can to support you and encourage you, and I don't want to add to what has become an incredibly difficult time. I can't imagine what it is doing to you to walk your kids through this. I do want to give you any comfort I can, but I do not feel it is right for me to mix in with all of those gathering to mourn Angela either, and I do not want to meet your family as a friend and try to conceal what I feel for you. I am praying for you and seeking God's wisdom for this time. I love you." End quote. So this is crazy because this arrest affidavit, it has all this redactions, and they redact her name throughout the police report or the affidavit, but then in the email, they show her full name, her signature, where she works, her phone number, everything. Holy shit, this is so uncomfortable. I will link this arrest affidavit in the description box if you guys want to read it, if you want to read the rest of his messages between James and Angela, if you want to understand the dates that Karen was coming into town corresponding with the dates that James was texting Angela saying, I wish I could spend more time with you in the hospital. I wish I could be there for you, but I can't be with our kids and I work and I have so much going on right now, but I wish I could be there with you. All of those things, I will link that so you can read it for yourself if you would like to. So that's where we stand at this point. James has already made his first court appearance. He's pleaded not guilty. I don't know what he thinks is going to happen, but he has pleaded not guilty. And from what I can tell, despite what he told his business partner, Ryan Redfern, about having to hire a homicide attorney. Have you ever heard of such a thing? But having to hire a homicide attorney, James Craig is being represented by a public defender, but he's pleading not guilty. And at this point, I definitely think we're going to go to trial with this because he's pleading not guilty, and we'll have more details and more information at that point. But right now, that's all I have for you. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments. This is absolute bananas. I'm so sickened by this man. I cannot believe, it really scares you to think that somebody could be so loving and kind and make you believe that they love you and they care about you when they are doing the exact opposite behind the scenes with somebody else not caring about you. And then on top of that, actively trying to poison you and murder you. And while you're confiding them about how bad you're feeling, they're like, oh, baby, I'm so sorry you feel this bad. But they're the ones that made you feel sick. It just is so crazy to me that something like this can happen and anybody can be this terrible. But here we are. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button if you like the video. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Follow me on social media. Follow my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host every week with retired police detective Derek Levasseur. All the links are in the description box. And don't forget to try my coffee, Criminal Coffee Company, the best coffee there ever was. Thank you all so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. And I'll see you soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood